This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Hello again and welcome to the broadcast. We've got some fluctuating temperatures to start the work week. Today's highs will soar past 40 and then drop like a rock tonight. That could cause some flash freezing on slick surfaces. Colder temperatures tomorrow give way to a messy mix of snow, ice, and rain Wednesday night into Thursday. The Trump tariffs take effect at midnight tonight on China, Mexico, and Canada, our three largest trade partners. Will this trigger a trade war? Many people want to know. More importantly, what does it mean for you, the consumer? The president telling reporters last night,
we may have short-term some little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world.
The White House says until Canada and Mexico crack down on the flow of fentanyl coming into this country, that 25% tariff will remain in place. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
We're now in a trade war with Mexico and Canada. For the American people, it'll now be a war between prices and their paychecks. That is the last thing we need.
Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace admits higher prices could be in store at the grocery store.
There is a potential risk, as Donald Trump mentioned, but Canada and Mexico, let's face it, these are the facts. They made their bed, and now they can lie in it.
This morning, President Trump spoke by phone with both the leaders of Canada and Mexico. Over the weekend, Canadian hockey fans booed the U.S. national anthem at an NHL game in Ottawa to protest those tariffs. Elon Musk says the agency responsible for foreign aid, USAID, is beyond repair and will be shut down. Reporter Garrett Hake in Washington.
And just before 2 o'clock this morning, Musk posting on X that his team, quote, spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper. The agency's website is down and its future remains very much uncertain.
Musk is heading up White House efforts to downsize the federal government. President Trump meets tomorrow at the White House with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The heads of state expected to discuss victory over Hamas and expanding diplomatic relations with Arab countries. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham thinks Iran will also come up.
Bibi and the Israelis are going to have to make a decision relatively soon what to do about the Iran nuclear program. I think it's a threat to mankind.
Netanyahu is the first foreign head of state to visit the White House since Trump took office 2 weeks ago. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is at the southern border today, his first official trip since being confirmed as head of the Pentagon. Hegseth says border security is national security. Yuma, Arizona Mayor Douglas Nichols agrees.
I believe President Trump got reelected primarily for this, to secure the border, to secure our country. So this is the will of the people.
Anger over the president's crackdown, however, on illegal immigrants spilled into the streets of L.A. last night. Reporter Amanda Starantino on the chaos that erupted in Los Angeles.
LAPD ordered multiple street closures in the area as the moving protests grew in size. It eventually shut down the 101 as demonstrators took their rally to the freeway.
The protesters waved Mexican flags as they demonstrated against deportations. Illegal border crossings, by the way, have plunged more than 60% since Trump took office. 2 aviation disasters in 2 days has many Americans wondering if it's safe to fly. First, that deadly crash of a Learjet Friday night in Philadelphia. Correspondent Emily Akita.
Investigators are one step closer to understanding what went wrong aboard that medevac plane, recovering the aircraft's black box 8 feet underground.
The plane plunged 1,500 feet after takeoff, killing all 6 on board and 1 person on the ground. 22 were hurt. Fox's CB Cotton.
City officials say the crash site actually impacted an area spanning 4 to 6 blocks, with some debris even found in more remote places.
Meantime, the investigation continues into last Wednesday's deadly collision in the skies over Washington, D.C. Correspondent Grady Trimble has that story.
Crews have recovered 55 of the victims from the Potomac. That means that there are still 12 families waiting for their loved ones.
67 people died when an American Airlines jet collided with a military helicopter last Wednesday night while attempting to land at Reagan National Airport. Panama is pledging to end a key canal deal with Communist China after a visit to Panama by our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Asian affairs expert Gordon Chang says this is a big deal.
This is absolutely critical because China can shut down the canal at will.
72% of all the vessels that travel through the Panama Canal are coming from or going to a U.S. port. Panama's president says his nation will retain sovereignty over that 51-mile waterway, but he is revisiting an 8-year-old deal with China that gave China favorable passage through the canal, which connects the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. Blockbuster trade in the NBA. The Dallas Mavericks are sending Luka Doncic to the LA Lakers in a move that has Big D stunned. This fan can't believe it.
I would have rather had 10 years of never winning a championship with Luka rather than trading Luka away in the prime of his career. That's wild.
The 3-team, 5-player swap also involved the Utah Jazz. We'll have more sports with Randy coming up a little later. Also ahead on the Noon Report today, previewing the Shapiro budget. Hochul fears a trade war, and local sheriff won't play nice with ICE.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. We're still riding that temperature roller coaster. I'll fill in the numbers in the forecast coming up in 10.
Okay, Kevin, I know you will. Thank you very much. But before we get to that, let's check the stories making news where you live, all across New York and Pennsylvania. Local residents weighing in on new tariffs that take effect at midnight against China, Mexico, and Canada. These top shoppers expressing their concerns about the impact that'll have on food, fuel, and other costs.
It hurts the little guy when you're trying to buy something. We were promised that things are going to get better.
How is anybody able to afford anything? We're all going to go broke by the end of the week.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul's worried a trade war could result as a result of the Trump tariffs on our 3 largest trade partners.
Why are we doing this? New York State is the economic engine of the country. When you do something that hurts New York because we are in such close proximity to Canada, it's going to have a ripple effect across the country, and I'm concerned about that.
Hochul tells MSNBC the tariffs will amount to about a $1,300 tax on the residents of New York. Egg prices continue to soar as supply dwindles. The average cost for a dozen eggs has risen 50% the past year. Experts say the main reason for this is bird flu, which has infected many poultry farms. The USDA says over 13 million egg-laying hens have died or been slaughtered since December due to the bird flu. Well, if it seems like there's a lot of another kind of flu going around, it's because there is. Dr. Angela Branch with the University of Rochester says influenza is rampant right now.
Right now, influenza cases are still rising. They haven't yet peaked, which is a little bit unusual. The 2018 season was probably the last really bad influenza season, and I wouldn't be surprised if this season turns out to be pretty similar to that.
She says on the bright side, COVID numbers are down this year.
A lot of COVID deaths this year and not as many hospitalizations this winter season as we've seen previously. Maybe that's partly because everybody's sick with the flu.
Influenza claims up to 90,000 lives every year in this country. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro delivers his 3rd budget address to a joint session of the General Assembly tomorrow. We get a preview from Family Life's Brian Query.
The plan to be unveiled Tuesday is expected to seek substantially more aid for the poorest public schools and discuss a bailout for public transit, while emphasizing frugality. The budget proposal comes at a time when Pennsylvania is projected to have a $10.5 billion surplus when the fiscal year ends June 30th. But the state also faces growing deficits, a slow-growing economy, a fast-growing retirement age population, and cost pressures from a range of human services. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you, Brian. A New York doctor has become the first test of a new law that prohibits the shipment of abortifacients to states where they are illegal. Here's Family Life's Mark Webster.
Yeah, a Louisiana grad
grand jury has indicted New Paltz doctor Margaret Carpenter, her practice, and a third party with criminal abortion by means of abortion-inducing drugs, a felony. It's the first instance of criminal charges being filed against a doctor for sending the pills to a patient in another state since the 2022 overturn of Roe v. Wade. It's also the first test of New York's SHIELD laws, intended to protect prescribers who use telehealth to provide abortion drugs to patients in other states where abortion is banned. The pro-abortion Hochul administration says it's prepared to back up that SHIELD law. Mark Webster, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Mark. A New York Republican assemblyman fears state Democrats are purposely delaying to keep five-term GOP Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's seat vacant for as long as they can.
Fact of the matter is, these are Republican districts that will be impacted, and they are trying to disrupt the Trump administration and Leader Johnson from being able to deliver on their agenda.
The GOP's Matt Slater thinks Democrats may wait until the June primaries to fill Stefanik's seat in New York's North Country.
Tammany Hall corruption is alive and well in the state capitol. If you look at the track record of the Democrats, who control every aspect of state government here in New York, they've changed the rules so many times just because it benefits them. And in this case, it will deprive 800,000 New Yorkers of proper representation in Washington.
Pending Senate confirmation, Stefanik will vacate her House seat and become President Trump's UN ambassador. Now, state law requires Governor Hochul call a special election to fill that seat within 10 days of it being vacated. Onondaga County, New York Sheriff Toby Shelley says neither he nor any of his deputies will detain illegal immigrants for federal ICE officials. ICE uses detainers to get custody of migrants before they're deported. Sheriff Shelley says the policy that was in place when he took office a couple years ago will remain in place, and he's not going to play ball with federal immigration law. A popular baby food maker has just announced a product recall. Details from reporter Matt Piper.
Gerber is recalling edible sticks meant to ease teething pain over a possible choking hazard. It's recalling and discontinuing its brand of Soothe and Chew teething sticks after receiving customer complaints about choking. The company says one emergency room visit has been reported. The teething sticks are edible teethers marketed to parents and guardians of children 6 months and older. Gerber says the products were sold in stores and online across the U.S. and Puerto Rico.
And there's a dog food recall you should know about today. Blue Ridge Beef recalling over 5,000 pounds of dog food due to salmonella contamination. That dog food was sold in 8 states along the East Coast, including New York and Pennsylvania. Sports is next. We call it the 2-minute drill right here on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, how about the Sabres? Buffalo won their third straight contest, taking down New Jersey 4-3. Tage Thompson netted his 26th goal of the season before leaving the game after taking an elbow to the face. J.J. Peterka, Ryan McLeod, and Jason Zucker also lit the lamp in the victory. The Rangers had a big third period, scoring 3 times to turn a 2-1 deficit into a 4-2 victory. Mika Zibanejad tied it up at 2, and then Keandre Miller and Artemi Panarin found the back of the net. Alexi Lafreniere scored the Blue Shirts' first goal in the second period. For the Islanders, it was too much Carter Verhaeghe. He had the hat trick, and Verhaeghe also dished out an assist. The Panthers doubled up New York 6-3, and that snaps the Islanders' 7-game winning streak. Also winning on the ice, the Stars, Ducks, Blues, Red Wings, and Flames. NBA action saw the Celtics come back and beat Philadelphia 118-110. Jason Tatum had 35 points, and he dished out 11 helpers for the C's. Tyrese Maxey led the Sixers with 34 points. The Cavs, Pistons, Raptors, and Grizzlies also picked up wins. NASCAR's first race of the season saw pole sitter Chase Elliott finish what he started. Elliott held off Ryan Blaney to take the checkered flag at the Cookout Clash. Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, and Bubba Wallace rounded out the top 5. And in the world of golf, Rory McIlroy celebrated his 27th Tour victory, winning the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, finishing 21 under par. He is now 22nd on the all-time PGA Tour wins list. That is a look at sports.
Thank you, Randy. Still to come on the Noon Report for a Monday. Tiger moms on the prowl. Phone-free February. And Trump tariffs trigger trade war.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. On this date, February the 3rd, 1468, Johannes Gutenberg died. Not only was he the inventor of the printing press using movable metal type, he could be considered one of the greatest liberators of thought in human history. Prior to the printing press, copying by hand was a slow, laborious process that made books expensive and rare. There was a strong chance in the copies of the copies of the copies that were available for people to read that copy errors had been made and preserved. Errors were especially common in works containing scientific charts and diagrams, for example, displaying the positions of the planets or something like that. The printing press changed all of that. Printing became the first mass production industry, and that made books far less expensive. A well-stocked medieval monastic library may have contained only a few hundred books, but after the printing press, individuals could amass far larger private collections, and as a result, become self-taught in a whole variety of different areas. Access to more books was also a spur to creativity, contributed to the blossoming of science and literature and philosophy in early modern Europe. With printing, every copy of a book is exactly the same. Errors can be corrected in future editions. This was extremely important in all fields, but especially in the sciences. Even more, printing made it essentially impossible to suppress ideas. The revolutionary teaching of medieval religious reformers like John Wycliffe or John Huss could to some degree be stopped by the authorities. But that wasn't the case with Martin Luther. Luther even commented, and I quote, "God invented the printing press to reform his church." Printing also resulted in new forms of literature, from comic books and pulps to essays, short stories, and novels. Most importantly, Gutenberg's invention enabled the growth of education and led to an explosion in literacy. It's simply impossible to imagine what the world would have become without the printing press. However, there's plenty of evidence today that the world is squandering the riches left to us because of the printing press. A recent article in The Atlantic was entitled, "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books." It told of an Ivy League professor who learned that a student had never read a complete book during high school. His colleague then reported that his students were unable to remain focused on a single sonnet. Of course, professors have long complained, since the beginning of time, in fact, that students just aren't what they used to be. But today that's actually true. According to the nation's report card, which measures the math and reading levels of 4th and 8th graders, there's a genuine crisis of literacy and learning in our nation. As Angela Morbido summarized on X, 8th grade literacy is the lowest ever recorded, below 50% in many cities. But even worse is proficient reading, which according to the study is below 10% in many cities among 8th graders. In other words, the vast majority of students in America cannot ascertain the meaning of a word that they do read. So we now risk losing the literate, creative, intellectually curious, and fruitful society that was born of the printing press. Thankfully, there are growing movements within education that offer wonderful alternatives to the norm and produce well-read literate graduates. Predictably, many of these initiatives are led by Christians. After all, Christians believe words matter. And that only makes sense, given that Christians also believe that the creation and our redemption are direct products of words, the words of God. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
All right, John, thank you very much. Outside we go next. Kevin Williams.
Here is your Family Life weather forecast for this afternoon. Cloudy, a little spot of rain here and there, a little bit of fog, and temperatures climbing past 40. Turning colder tonight, some evening rain, some late night snow as temperatures drop into the 20s. Colder tomorrow, clouds and sun, some lake flurries off Lake Ontario, high temps in the 20s to mid 30s. On Wednesday, some limited sunshine and clouding up, high temps in the 20s and low 30s. Again, a mix of snow, ice, and rain expected Wednesday night into Thursday.
All right, Kevin, thank you. This is the Noon Report. I'm your host, Bob Price, and there's a lot to get to. Monday, the 3rd day of February. The new week brings new tariffs on everything from avocados to automobiles made in Mexico and Canada and sold right here in the States. President Trump's imposed a 25% tax on imports from our neighbors to the north and south, and those tariffs take effect at midnight.
This is retaliatory to a certain extent. Millions of people flowed into our country through Mexico and Canada, and we're not going to allow that.
In addition, there's going to be a 10% hike on everything imported from China. Republican Mitch McConnell doesn't like the sound of that.
It will drive the cost of everything up. In other words, it'll be paid for by American consumers.
How much of a price hike we'll see remains to be seen. China, Mexico, and Canada are our three largest trade partners. NBC's Christine Romans.
We think that food costs very quickly will start to go up because food margins are so narrow that most of that increase is going to be passed right on to the consumer.
Automakers also feel the effects of the Trump tariffs. Family Life's Jeremy Miller.
Yeah, the Detroit Regional Chamber and its Mish Auto affiliate says the tariffs will have a detrimental effect on our automotive industry in Michigan, the Great Lakes region, and across the continent. Audi, BMW, Ford, General Motors, Honda, Kia, Mazda, Nissan, Stellantis, Toyota, and Volkswagen all produce vehicles in Mexico. Ford, GM, and Stellantis produce vehicles in Canada. Some economists say President Trump may be using the tariffs as incentives for those automakers to move production to the U.S. Jeremy Miller, Family Life News.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says those in the U.S. legally should not fear immigration authorities.
The priority of this president is to go after criminal aliens that are making our streets more dangerous.
Noem adds if legal migrants are afraid of being wrongfully detained, it's because the media has perpetuated that fear.
The media has said that that's a possibility. There's nothing from this administration, from President Trump, or from any of the law enforcement individuals in these communities that has said that they need to walk around and be concerned about that at all.
Her comments come amid reports that ICE agents have detained some migrants who are in the country legally amid a nationwide deportation effort. All 6 aboard a medical transport plane that crashed in Philadelphia Friday night were Mexican nationals. None of them survived. A 7th person on the ground was also killed. 22 were hurt. That plane plunged 1,500 feet shortly after takeoff and left a crater 8 feet deep in the concrete below. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is calling for changes in air traffic control following a pair of aviation disasters, the one in Philadelphia we just mentioned, and also the one earlier last week in Washington, D.C.
Our air traffic control system is antiquated. A lot of the systems we use date back to World War II.
Duffy blames the shortage of air traffic controllers on the COVID pandemic.
The schools, the academies were shut down for a period of time, but once the schools opened up, they were running at half capacity, and when we had graduates, they couldn't get into the towers to train.
One air traffic controller was doing the job of 2 when that American Airlines jet collided with an Army helicopter near Reagan National Airport last Wednesday evening. On the Potomac River today, crews have begun lifting the wreckage from that plane out of the water. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in Washington ahead of a meeting tomorrow at the White House with President Trump. The heads of state will discuss, among other things, the future of Gaza.
I believe that we can strengthen security, broaden the circle of peace, and achieve a remarkable era of peace.
Mediators today begin brokering the next phase of the ceasefire hostage release deal with the terror group Hamas. Vice President J.D. Vance is meeting with government officials in East Palestine, Ohio today on this, the second anniversary of that horrific train derailment.
The big question that I had as a senator is people always ask, is the water clean to drink? Is the air clean to breathe? And luckily, we now have a great EPA administrator who I think can answer those questions and fix the problems on the ground. We're just going to go do a little fact-finding, talk to people, and see what's happening.
The train derailment on February 3rd, 2023, released toxic chemicals into the air, soil, and water. That disaster killed wildlife, livestock, and pets, and caused health problems in hundreds of East Palestine residents. A new study today finds seniors who are socially active develop dementia 5 years later than those who are not.
The 7-year study followed nearly 2,000 dementia-free older adults while checking in annually to track their cognitive health. Researchers found regular social activity led to a 38% lower chance of developing dementia. The role that social activity plays in cognitive health is unclear, but activities like bingo, board games, and conversations activate areas in the brain responsible for thinking and memory. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Phone Free February is underway. It's a campaign that encourages you to detach yourself as much as humanly possible from your digital devices. The creators of Phone Free February admit total detachment is not realistic, but there are ways to reduce your phone use. Even an hour less a day on your cellular device can have tremendous impact, they say, on your overall quality of life. Experts suggest you implement screen breaks in your daily routine and keep your phone out of your bedroom when you go to sleep at night. Next at noon, USA Today columnist Neetu Arnold is talking academics with Family Life's Greg Gillespie. She is convinced that parents need to take a proactive role in their children's education. Arnold calls it tiger parenting. Here's more of that conversation.
Tiger parenting it's usually seen as excessive involvement in education. When I wrote this piece, it was really in response to a much larger discussion that was happening whether America should be turned into a nation of tiger moms. And it was in response to this post that Vivek Ramaswamy made. You know, some people took his message as he wants to get rid of sleepovers, he wants to get rid of sports, he wants to get rid of fun. And that's not exactly what I heard from his post. What I saw was reprioritization towards education. It doesn't mean we have to give up sports or we have to give up fun. He pitted people who play sports and those who are into academics against each other. I actually think they shouldn't be pitted against each other. One of the great things about America is just that we value different skills and we value different paths to success. And I actually think we should be more concerned about the sort of apathy that's festering in American society, especially around education. Forcing your kids into activities they don't care about and these cram sessions, leave that behind and combine it with the American entrepreneurial spirit. I think that would be a force to be reckoned with.
Help us figure out what is going to be most beneficial for the most people in our culture today.
Making sure that our schools are safe so that kids can feel like they're in a good learning environment and they don't feel like they need to disconnect from school. Making sure that teachers are able to stay in schools, which again, I think a lot of it has to do with just school safety and whether they can address misbehavior among students. Some of the things that I was talking about with motivation, that's really a cultural issue. How do we value different activities? If a school community celebrated just as much as they celebrate a football win, they celebrate the math Olympiad or someone who's doing something more academically inclined. And so spreading those social rewards among the school community, I think, could be one way to show that academics also matter too.
The schools across America run all the way from absolutely excellent to really, really struggling. But what can parents, what can families do to foster that among not only their own children, but their kids' friends and their classmates?
Paying attention to what your kids enjoy, and when they express an interest in an activity, just giving your full 100% support, your encouragement, maybe just being there for the kid. I know that sounds very simple, but I think that would make a big difference.
Your article in USA Today looking at what some other nations, you mentioned China, you mentioned India. What's your evaluation of how America is doing?
There needs to be more attention placed on STEM fields. I see why India and China places so much attention on STEM, and that's why they're producing so many engineers and doctors. On the other hand, I would say that system isn't necessarily better. It doesn't necessarily value individuality or what people are interested in. And that's what I think is so great about America. It's that we value all kinds of skills, but that's where I think we need better math education. I see one problem with the way we promote math here. It's just that I think a lot of people are trying to make it more friendly because they're not so focused on the teaching as much as they are on just making it fun. From my own personal experience with tutoring kids in math, something I saw was just that a lot of kids would get pushed ahead, even if they hadn't mastered concepts in previous grade levels. And until we address those issues, that's when they gain the confidence to tackle math problems. And so I think maybe there also needs to be a culture where it's okay that your kid, like every kid is going to be on a different timeline and they're going to achieve things at their own pace. Sometimes you have to make them go through tough things so that they come out feeling a sense of accomplishment.
That is USA Today columnist Neetu Arnold speaking with our own Greg Gillespie. And this is the Noon Report on Family Life.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. We've got an active weather pattern upon us. Though temperatures are trending higher this day, they'll drop again tonight and rain will flip to snow. In the middle of the week, we've got a large system that'll arrive with a messy mix. That'll be Wednesday night and Thursday. Snow, ice, and rain then. For this afternoon, cloudy, a little spot of rain here and there, a little bit of fog, and temperatures climbing past 40. Turning colder tonight, some evening rain, some late night snow as temperatures drop into the 20s. Some surfaces will slicken. Colder tomorrow, clouds, some sun, some lake flurries off Lake Ontario. High temps in the 20s to mid 30s. On Wednesday, some limited sunshine and clouding up with high temps in the 20s and low 30s. Again, a mix of snow, ice, and rain expected Wednesday night into Thursday.
All right, thanks for the heads up, Kevin. Finally at noon, the countdown is underway to Super Bowl 59, and correspondent Lisa Carton says the most watched sporting event on the planet would be nothing without some great game day grub.
Are you winging it for the Super Bowl? Broccoli might be a cheaper party snack this year. A Super Bowl watch party will cost about the same as last year. A Wells Fargo report shows feeding 10 people for the big game will run around $139, which is 10 cents more than last year. And those yummy chicken wings, a game day favorite, they rose 7%. Here's to a winning plan for your party guests. I'm Lisa Carton.
And great commercials, too, we hope. And that's our world, the world we live in, Monday, February 3rd. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.